Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of my trip down memory lane to the Pacific Crest Trail and my Thru-hike exactly 10 years ago. In the last episode we were in Big Bear Lake and had a 0 day there, a very pleasant 0 day in a lovely lodge, slept in a real bed for the first time again, which was very nice, and we then had the hostel owner shuttle us back to the trail and then set off again with very heavy rucksacks as we had a lot of food with us. And we were really looking forward to getting going again, but it was still quite exhausting. So it's always the case when you've had a break for a day that your body gets used to do nothing again very quickly, or not having such a heavy backpack on your back. But we definitely felt like carrying on, and we went straight in, and you can see here that we were dropped off and we're right back in a beautiful landscape. We were a bit higher up in terms of altitude, which is why we were in the trees still, but we had these amazing views of the desert again, and as always, we really enjoyed it. Nevertheless, we all felt the weight on our shoulders, and at that day, we took quite a few breaks to lose a bit of weight from the food we had with us, and when we arrived at camp, it was still pretty early, and we set up our tents and sat down together outside and had very tasty things for dinner. I had this wrap here, which wasn't a typical flour tortilla that we usually had, but a lavash bread, and it was really tasty. I don't know if it was sourdough or something, but it certainly tasted very different to the flour tortillas we used to eat. And I put couscous with various toppings and hot sauce and cream cheese in it, and it was really pretty tasty. It was so delicious that I would have thought that you could have sold it, at a snack bar or something, and that no one would have complained. I think it was one of the tastiest things I prepared on that trail. And of course that was nice after we had just enjoyed some nice town food, and you always miss that a bit. We were traveling stoveless, so we were relatively limited in our choices of food, so you have to think a bit more creatively around the corners. You cannot just open a Knorr dish and pour water in and then it tastes pretty good. You have to put together a few different components, and this one was really definitely very tasty. Here you can see a typical scene where we soak food in our bowls. So instead of cooking food, we soak it. This works really well with everything that is already pre-cooked and dried again, like instant rice, instant couscous, instant noodles. It works just as well as with hot water, it just takes longer. Yes, and so we set off again from Big Bear Lake after our first day on the trail, and we were able to look back a little. I think this is Big Bear Lake down here, I'm not quite sure, but in any case, we had another look back and at this landscape where we had spent our 0 day. And of course, it looks very beautiful. You can also slowly see that we were getting closer to the Sierras, so we had a lot of desert terrain at the beginning, and now higher and higher mountains were coming into view. We didn't walk right up here or anything, but you could kind of tell that the terrain was already changing, that it was slowly moving into higher areas. Although we would have another real desert detour, I think we get to that in the next episode or the one after that. What we also saw for the first time was a burn zone, an area where a bushfire had raged. You can see these stumps of burned trees everywhere, which is of course a very sad sight, especially because there are many more areas. The forest fire season is getting longer and longer in California and Oregon and Washington, and it's like that a lot of places, a lot of parts of the PCT have burned down quite a bit, and I'm glad that I did it in 2015. Even if I would like to hike it again. But I'm glad that I was able to see the trail in still quite healthy condition. I recently read a blog post from, or I think it was on Reddit or something. So, there are the big three trails, the PCT, the CDT, and the AT. And in this post, someone said that even though the AT is always called the Long Green Tunnel because it just goes through the forest, and that's supposedly quite boring. But this Redditor said that even the most boring parts on the AT are still more beautiful than the burn zones on the PCT. And I believe that can be true. This burnt zone here, I think it is a bit older. There's already some green here. But later we went through burnt zones where there was really only ash on the ground, and that's frustrating and also shocking, and just a shame when you're out in nature and see how much has been destroyed. And yes, forest fires are normal, but not to the extent that they are currently happening and have been happening for several years now. It is of course not normal, and it is due to climate change, man-made climate change, and yes, it should be clear to everyone that these privileges that we have with these beautiful trails will not be there forever. In other words, on the one hand, we should do these things now while we can still do them, and on the other hand, we should do as much, we should do everything we can to ensure that we can still do these things in the future, and that there are still these beautiful landscapes in the future, and that we not just walk through barren, burned out landscapes. That's just a little food for thought. But everything was still very lively, and it was very green at the time we were there, and it's still green now. You can still have a wonderful walk there. And yes, then we had one day that was shortly after we had just started our stage again from Big Bear Lake, where it was supposed to rain pretty heavily. And again, that was unusual. So if you had read about the PCT in the initial phase in forums beforehand, then it always said that it didn't rain at all in the first 3 months. And as I said, we had experienced a lot of rain already, and it was supposed to rain really hard and for a long time on that day. And at first there was nothing. We set off and it didn't rain at all. But then it started at some point, and that wasn't so nice. I mean, that's complaining on a high level, of course, but hiking in the rain is simply not a very pleasant undertaking. When you're in Norway and stuff like that, it can fit with the charm of the landscape when it's raining, or at the North Sea, for example, when there is no wind or something, then it's just somehow not the North Sea. So, but here, of course, we actually wanted to walk in the sun, or at least in good weather. It's also relatively muddy when it rains because the path is very dusty and you get extremely dirty, which is kind of annoying. Well, nevertheless, of course, we kept walking and we walked through beautiful areas, great rock formations here. We had a bit more greenery, a bit more water. In general, it was really nice this year that there, because of all the rain we had more plants than there would be usually during that time. Nevertheless, it still really poured that day, and we trudged through the rain more badly than not, and somehow we all didn't really feel like it. We wanted to get to our destination as quickly as possible. As always, we had already thought about a place to camp near a body of water, and of course, we always try to camp near water when so that we didn't have to carry that much water. And yeah, that's exactly where we had already chosen. Nonetheless, great scenery, great views, and I kind of like a terrain like this. It reminds me of Elbsandsteingebirge, which is a small mountain range in eastern Germany, and I find that very beautiful. In between, we also passed the 300-mile mark, so another 100 miles done, and so we were slowly gaining power, and we were slowly hiking quicker, and we had slowly arrived at an average daily mileage of 22-25 miles. And at some point other hikers were saying that 30 is the new 20, so now you should actually always walk 30 miles or 10 by 10 or whatever. But we weren't in a hurry. We actually stayed at around 20 miles, 25 miles a day until almost the end, because we had booked return flights. And we were actually of the opinion that you should enjoy this great time for as long as possible. Nevertheless, you simply become super fast and you automatically walk longer distance because, you simply don't want to arrive at camp at 3 p.m. That's nonsense too, of course. So, but we just took longer breaks and enjoyed looking into the distance. Yes, we went through these gorges, and by the time we had reached our chosen campsite, which was here by this body of water. You can see from my face that there were some things that weren't so great, and that was mainly the ground here. It was completely sandy, but not the kind of hard sand you would find on the beach, but loose river sand, and you couldn't pitch tents in it at all. We were lucky we had the double rainbow with us, because with the crossbow you can't set it up halfway. If you had a tent that was only erected with trekking poles and then had to be tied down, you would definitely have an additional problem. So everything we needed to do was just fix the corners of the tent, and with trekking poles in here, then you could freestand the tent, so to speak. Of course, you would still have to brace this side here somehow, and we also set up our trekking poles inside here, and as you can see, as additional poles, and then put stones everywhere and somehow hope that it would hold, because it was still raining cats and dogs. And we also had our umbrellas here, because you can see there's a gap here that's for ventilation, but when it's windy and raining, water was actually blown in all the time. So because there's only a mosquito netting but no water repellent fabric. And then we put our umbrellas up there, and at some point I went out later, and one umbrella was gone. I was like, where has it gone? And the wind blew it into this pond, even though I had somehow fixed it to the ground with pegs, but they didn't hold. And it got stuck, luckily, in a beaver dam, whatever. I also saw the beaver, which was pretty cool. But in any case, there was this dam was pretty big, and the umbrella was in there, but it was out of reach, and I didn't really feel like going into the water in this miserable weather. And then I tied a stick to a string, and the umbrella was lying around with the pole pointing upwards. So I threw the stick into the umbrella and was able to pull the umbrella back towards me. I remember that was kind of an adventure. What was also very adventurous was that I probably picked up something from the water, from this stream here, I guess, from this beaver pond thing, whatever. Probably Giardia, which is this nasty protozoan parasite, because afterwards I had, you know what I had. And that wasn't nice at all. We'll come back to that in the next episode, I think, especially how I got rid of it. And, it was quite the adventure. Well, in any case, I think it was that water. I filtered as usual, so I filtered all my water, but this water, it had animals living in it, and it was also dammed up and not flowing, and maybe the filters don't really filter everything out 100%, or I don't know, maybe got something on my hand when I was handling the umbrella or something, or it could have come from somewhere else. It's also possible, but it definitely overlapped in time, and I was still fine then, but something. So I guess that might be the chance where I got it. Well, the next day we had survived everything. We stayed reasonably dry. We then took down the tent, and that was of course completely wet. And as you can imagine, taking it down in the sand and packing it up, it was really muddy and nasty, really not nice at all. But we were lucky it wasn't raining when we set off in the morning, and so I don't know, an hour or so after we started, we passed the road, and there was a motorhome with a trail angel, Cajon. I think he's still active. An elderly guy who hiked the PCT himself a few years ago, and he had set up a lot of chairs in a circle of chairs, and we had second breakfast there in the form of fruit and cake. And whoever wanted, we didn't want, a root beer float. I had never heard of that before. I had never heard of root beer before until the kickoff, where I had my first root beer. There was this guy who was advertising his business, and he was giving away drinks for free, and he was like, what do you want? I was like, what do you have? And he was like, Coke, Sprite, root beer. And I was like, what? Root beer? What's that? I didn't know it at all. And he was like, that's, and then he somehow explained it to me, and I think it's something similar to a malt beer in Germany, but much, much sweeter. And I drank it and I didn't like it at all. I finished it, of course, but no, it was not something I could enjoy. But it's apparently something that children in the United States love to drink, and they're really into it. And a root beer float, as you or probably know, is root beer and ice cream. And I thought that was totally weird. And well, luckily I already knew that I didn't like root beer, so I said no to the root beer float and stayed with the fruit and the cake, which was, of course, very, very tasty. So the next day we also had this great trail magic here, and at first glance it may seem relatively standard. It's a cool box with a bit of water and some fruit, and we were standing around there eating a banana, and suddenly a lady came walking along the trail. She must have been, I don't know, in her 90s probably. She was really old, really small. She was bent over and she was carrying water. And we were all standing there and somehow totally frozen because we couldn't believe that she was actually maintaining this cache. And well, after a few seconds, we helped her carrying the things, and I think that was really amazing. That, I mean, it was quite the distance to the next road. It was probably like, I don't know, 500 yards or something to the next road, and she was carrying all these items, all the water, which is heavy, and the fruit, and she walked back and forth all the time, and I thought that was very impressive that at her age and at her physical abilities that she was still doing that as a kind of charity and selflessness, and I was very impressed by that. You could see that it wasn't easy for her, but that she did it anyway, and she was just a really wonderful woman to do that for us. And of course, we were very happy to take a sip of water and eat a banana. Fruit in general. I wasn't a big fruit eater before, and I'm not a big fruit eater now, but I loved fruit in the trail, especially oranges, which I didn't like at all before, but I got to know them there and learned to love them. And you sort of long for fruit and vegetables and fresh things in general, and I was always really happy about a banana like that. Yeah, that is Silverwood Lake, I think it's called. It was a total surprise that it appeared there. I wasn't even aware that there was a lake waiting for us. And we were just walking around the corner and then, wow, that's a lake. And at some point we came down the trail to the lake shore and we went for a swim, and that was really nice. So you have to imagine it's like, I mean, we had been in Big Bear not so long ago, but as soon as you've walked there for a day, you're sweating again and so on. And the clothes, even if you wash them in a washing machine, somehow they don't get really clean and all of that. And all the dust and everything. And so what I want to say is that washing is rather rare. And when you jump into a lake like that, and yeah, and even as a surprise, without expecting it, it's so wonderful. And then we went for a really nice swim, went for a dip, and then sunbathed by the lake. It was a really nice day, really nice moment to just take a break for an hour and enjoy the fact that we had this nature all to ourselves and could use it for ourselves. It was very, very pleasant. Yes, here are a few more impressions of the evening light. I've said it 1,000 times now. I just loved it. And now we were heading back towards the real desert. The Mojave Desert was still to come. I think it's somehow one of the hottest places in the entire world. The Death Valley is part of the Mojave Desert. And yeah, of course, we had to lose some altitude for that. And we were slowly approaching it again. So you can already see that there are no more trees on the mountains. And yes, somehow I was also looking forward to getting back to the desert. I wasn't finished with it yet, and I was looking forward to more desert hiking. I can remember here, well, it was an absolute slope where we were camping, and I even shoveled away a bit of sand. But we were so exhausted, and we needed a campsite, and it was just completely, well, full of these strange bushes. The whole landscape was covered, and there was just not a single spot for a tent. And we passed this one. It was right next to the trail, and someone was already there. And we were asking, is there still more room? And they were like, yeah, theoretically, there might be still something possible over there. And then we looked, and then, it was kind of, it was not great, but it was all we could get. So we just camped there, and we didn't really care. It was just for a night. And Andy went on somehow. The next day, we discovered him in a, where the trail makes a bend. There was a little bit of space right next to the trail, basically on the trail. That's where he was camping. And at night, he was somehow attacked by chipmunks who wanted to carry his shoes away or something. So generally speaking, it wasn't the best area for wild camping. But of course, we managed to survive that. And that was our morning view, and you can't really complain about that. I mean, it looks really, really nice. Yeah, it even looks so nice that I've included it here again. Well, okay, but yes, it really was a beautiful area. And I always really liked it when the morning mist was still in the valleys, and we were usually a bit higher than the valley. We then spread our sleeping bags, which always got clammy at night. The tent too, we then spread everything out on the bushes, and while we had breakfast, we dried them a little bit and then packed them up and unpacked them again during the lunch break for further drying. So yeah, that was that. That was a standard procedure, that you were constantly drying our clothes somehow, even though it wasn't raining most of the time. But it was just the humidity from the fog and the air we were breathing and so on. Yes, and then we had a great view here for the first time. I don't know if that's already the high Sierras. I don't think so, because it's so close, but it was really high mountains, all covered in snow. And they were really towering over everything we were seeing. And it was a great sight. It was also a bit of a, it was also a bit of a lure. So, hey, soon you'll be here. Soon you'll really be hiking in really high mountain ranges and in a completely different region, completely different terrain. But until then, you still have a lot of desert to cross. And that's how it was in the end. Yeah, so this is also a site that somehow makes all PCT hikers a little bit happy. Not quite us, because we didn't eat meat. But McDonald's is one of the things that Americans and Germans love. And it's just funny that McDonald's is signposted here on a PCT. It's just 0.4 miles to the right along the road here to the McDonald's. And yep, that's where we went, and we ate, I can't remember, some kind of ice cream or something like that. Not even the fries are vegetarian in the US. And I don't know. Nevertheless, we really enjoyed spending our time here. And of course, we drank a lot of Coke. And that's the best thing about US McDonald's compared to German McDonald's, that you get free refills. We don't have this concept in Germany anymore. It was the standard concept in the 90s, but nowadays you only get one serving of Coke or whatever. And I really love that in the US, that you get always the free refills on everything. But yes, so we just hung out there in the McDonald's, and we charged our phones and stuff like that. And the half of the store was full of PCT hikers, and the other half was truckers, I guess, because it's right in the middle of this interstate. And it was somehow a really cool social gathering. So, that people somehow got together and enjoyed this lifestyle a little bit. And I think there was also a subway around the corner, but you would have to walk a long way to get there, probably 400 meters or something. And we were too lazy for that, which is actually quite absurd when you think about it. Nevertheless, this stage ends here, and another week was completed on the PCT. I slowly settled into a groove, and somehow I was in a state of, a meditative mind state, and I didn't think too much about what I was actually doing and where I was actually, and to take photos or anything. Maybe also not much happened there, but to be honest, I can't remember it that well. So the things that I've shown here, I remember all of them, but what happened in between, and there must have been a lot in between, because I had way less pictures than usual for this episode. Those things maybe have just slipped my mind, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Of course, you cannot remember everything, especially not 10 years later, but the things that you do remember, you might remember just as clearly. So with this, we end this episode. As always, if you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the channel, and we continue on to Agua Dulce in the next episode, which was also a really cool stage, I think. And yeah, see you then. Bye.